Okay, Prof Zarina dah ada. Okay. Alright, so we begin. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone. Okay, welcome to the webinar session. Okay, on the tips for winning for FRGS grant 2022. Okay, my name is Lokman bin Ibrahim. I am a coordinator at the Grant Research Grant Acquisition Unit, or known as the Unit Perolehan Grant at the Research Management Center at RMC UiTM. Okay, allow me to introduce our speaker, our speaker for is presently Senior Consultant, Paediatrician and Clinical Geneticist at Faculty of Medicine UKM, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, and Head of the Thalassemia Center, Hospital Chancellor Tuan Mohd, and Principal Associate Fellow at the Tun Fatimah Hashim Women's Leadership Center UKM. She was previously Deputy Dean of Postgraduate Studies in the Faculty of Medicine UKM, and was also a committee member for the development of the UKM Children's Hospital. Okay, Prof Zarina graduated from the University of Malaysia in 1992 and subsequently obtained her pediatric qualification from UKM in 1998. She then pursued her postgraduate subspecialty training in medical genetics at the University of Glasgow with distinction, and University of Southampton, Wessex Clinical Genetics Services, United Kingdom. Okay, Prof Zarina was previously head of Paediatrics in UKM Medical Center and Principal Fellow at the UKM Medical Molecular Biology Institute. Her research interests include clinical, therapeutics, and molecular aspects of thalassemia, childhood leukemia, dysmorphology, genetics counseling, and health advocacy for women and children. Okay, Prof Zarina is a committee member of the Clinical Management and Support of Rare Disease, Ministry of Health Malaysia, and a member of the Specialty Education Subcommittee, okay, specialty in the Pediatric Clinical Genetics for the Malaysian Medical Council. Okay, she is presently a co-head of the clinical and also health science domain in the evaluation committee of multiple fundamental research grants at the Malaysia Ministry of Higher Education level. In addition to this, Prof Zarina is also active in various professional organizations and also NGOs. She is currently an executive council member for the Malaysian Genetics Society and my HVP Varium Malaysian Node, in addition to co-chair Health Committee of National Council of Women's Organisation Malaysia and CWO, Executive Committee member for the Global Globin Network, and also member of the Education Committee for Human Genome Organisation, SUGO. Okay, quite long, very impressive CV, Prof. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Prof Zarina to deliver your presentation. And for the audience, if you have any questions, maybe you can ask verbally at the end of presentation, or if you have question in the middle of your presentation, you may drop your question in the chat box, so I will read later on. Okay, Prof Zarina, you please welcome to start your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Lokman, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera saya ucapkan ya. Jadi saya juga nak ucapkan terima kasih lah ya kepada pihak UiTM ya kerana menjemput saya ya untuk berkongsi sedikit pengalaman dan tips berkaitan permohonan untuk grant FRGS KPT ya. Jadi allow me to share my slides. Okay. So can you see the slides? Yes?
Yes, Prof. Clearly.
Yes. Okay. So for about the next 45 minutes or 1 hour or so, I'll be talking about tips for a successful FRGS application. Yeah. So basically, this is what I will be covering upon. Yeah, an introduction, right? Some bits are taken from the garis panduan of FRGS itself. Then the overall approach and preparation. Then I will go into the different proposal sections, right? A little bit about the tips and the do's and don'ts, yeah? For each of these sections. Then I will give about 6 to 7 slides, yeah, about some of the proposals that I have reviewed at internally or at KPT level, right? Untuk kongsi pengalaman sedikit di situ, and just a single slide to summarize it all. So basically, when we talk about FRGS, the F comes from the word fundamental. So it means basic research, and usually we are always reminded about addressing the whys and the hows. Yeah. Now I'm a clinician, yeah, saya pediatrician, yeah. So sometimes it gets a little bit tricky about trying to draw the line between what is actually fundamental and what is actually applied research, right? So when we talk about FRGS, we tend to talk about mechanisms of disease, right? Maybe some advancement of a technique in the lab, for example, right? So it is not applied research, yeah, itself. So going back to FRGS, it's about exploration of new ideas, new concepts, theories, in order to generate new discoveries and expansion of knowledge and technologies. Okay, so maybe there are gaps in the current knowledge of a particular problem that you're trying to solve. So your research is going to address how you're going to bridge that gap. Okay, so basically, is addressing those unresolved problems. And this is why in every single proposal, the problem statement and the research gap analysis is really critical. So this is where you're going to have to elaborate clearly, right? What is the significance of your research and how it is going to be impactful. So I've mentioned it's about new concepts or new theories. We can also talk about new models or processes or framework, which could then be adopted into certain policies, right? And it's also about improving technology at a fundamental level. Maybe there are certain tests that you don't understand why it doesn't work at a certain level and you want to improve it, right? So that could also be considered as being fundamental. Right? So again, back to being a clinician, right? It is not, FRGS is not an observational study per se. So we're not here about talking about following up a cohort of patients, right? And to see how they, respond to treatment. No, it's not that itself. I mean, you're going to have to think a little bit how you probably can embed a little bit of it, but it is absolutely not an observational study in entirety. So when we talk about the impact of an FRGS, the outcome now talks about addressing the quintuple outcome, right? Previously, we talked about quadruple helix, but now it's about quintuple. And this is also stated in the garis panduan. So we talk about impact to academia, to the government, to the industry, to the public, and also to the environment. So when you write up and they ask you about the impact, maybe your research doesn't address all of these 5 aspects. It's okay. You can just pick 1 or 2, which is the most relevant, and elaborate on it. Doesn't mean that you have to have impact from all 5 aspects, okay? Now, I think one of the most important thing before you embark on submitting a proposal for FRGS is to really read this garis panduan, and please make sure that it is always the most recent version. So this is the pindaan tahun 2022, and this is the one that you should be referring to. So we all know, right? I recently also had this session with UKM itself, my colleagues in UKM. We all know that it comes at a certain time of the year, right? In December, November, October, November, December, we start preparing because by January, usually the cycle opens. So it's always about preparing well in advance because we know it's coming up, and when you prepare better, you're going to make a much better submission. And I've already mentioned that we really need to know the guidelines in depth, okay? Because sometimes when we tend to overlook some of the details, this is where then we might face these technical knockouts, okay? And we don't want that, okay? Because sometimes you're going to have a really fantastic proposal, and just because it is a technical knockout, then, you know, you miss the boat, okay? So familiarize yourselves with the actual format, which is available online, right? And you really, sometimes we overlook and we're not so familiar, right? So you need to be very well versed about the format because each grant submission has got their own format. If you apply for a Newton grant, for example, it has its format, but for FRGS, it has its format. So we don't want to be missing out on key things that are required from that particular grant submission. So if it is your first submission, don't feel disheartened, right? I also know many people who are very successful in their first submission, but they are probably the ones who have put in a lot of effort and have prepared well in advance. So if you're unsure about how to go about doing things, there are many opportunities at each of the universities, right? That you can be mentored. And I know like in UKM, recently we've had a series of up to 4, I think, bengkel pemurnian, yeah, at the faculty level, right? So before it goes up to the university level, we have our own pemurnian proposal where we give feedback, right? Sometimes we give feedback 2-3 rounds for each of the proposal because we want to make sure that all the possible issues are addressed. Okay, so it's always good if you can tag yourself to somebody who has been successful in the FRGS application, or to tag yourself to a more senior researcher. Okay. Nonetheless, if it's your second try or your third try, right, it's always about try again, okay? Please be sure that you do review the past comments, right, about why the grant wasn't successful, okay? And if you're going to submit it again, you must make sure that you had actually addressed those comments, okay? Because when we look back, we have at KPT level, we can look at the title, we can look at the similarity index, right? Although that one is more towards the executive summary, rather than the entire proposal. But nonetheless, even if it's a repeat submission, please ensure that there is refinement to the proposal, okay? It doesn't sit well if you submit the exact same proposal that you did for the previous cycle, okay? Now, when we talk about the content, the fundamental issues is what must be clearly highlighted. I've already mentioned about it not being an applied research, especially when it comes to clinicians, right? We tend to have to be very clear about what fundamental aspects we're trying to address in that research. It has to have the FRGS criteria when we talk about the new theories and so on and so forth. And also it must be something that is novel. So when we review the proposals at either university or KPT level, the quality of the proposal says a lot about the researcher, right? It has to be meticulous, and the organization of the content, the flow must be good, okay? And the formatting and language construct, okay? We don't, necessarily penalize about, the language construct. I mean, if you do have very good ideas and just some minor construct issues and all that, we still look at the scientific merit of it all. But, if you have a proposal that is so well done and the quality is very high, then you will certainly get a lot more marks, and it becomes, it's nice to read the proposal because it shows that you have invested a lot of time and you are serious about the research that you are going to embark. So at the university level, saya juga a reviewer in UKM, right? So because the KPT evaluators will have access to what has been commented upon by the university level reviewers. So kalau the internal university level reviewers ask for resubmission, again, please address those corrections, okay? Because sometimes I have seen, ada juga yang 2 version, 3 version, ada yang 4, 5 version pun ada juga, ya. So it shows that you have attempted to address, and at KPT level, we do look at those comments. Just to let you know, usually when I open a particular proposal, I don't go straight away and look at the internal comments at the university level. I will still read it on my own first, right? Because I do not want to be biased, okay? So I will read it and see whether there's scientific merit, look at the quality. If I have any issues and concerns about whether this is, was it picked up at the university level, right? Then I will probably look at the versions that was submitted at the university level to see what were the corrections addressed or picked up, okay? So this must be addressed, okay? Because these are the things that are looked upon also semasa adanya proses penaziran at KPT level, ya. Sebab at KPT, kita tak semestinya ambil semua submissions daripada every single university that submits. We do penaziran, and if there are some issues, there have been times where the entire FRGS proposals from one particular university boleh ditolak, yeah. So we don't want that to happen, right? Because because of maybe a handful of FRGS that didn't qualify or did not look at the criteria clearly, and there were some problems, maybe the the panel reviewer said not endorsed, okay, but somehow maybe the research management center endorsed it. So those type of things are major. So we don't want to see that happen, because I'm sure a lot of people would have put in a lot of effort, yeah, to submit their research proposals. So at the university level, just like myself too, we try and assist our colleagues to improve the submission that they have made. Yeah? Nonetheless, if your proposal happens to be rejected either at faculty level or either at the university level, right? Please don't feel disheartened, right? If you want it to be relooked again, then you should discuss with your research management center for reconsideration. But the reason is why it's rejected at the university level is because of that lah, yeah, quality control, yeah. Sebab I have also seen several proposals that I am actually truly amazed at how it even got up to KPT level, right? Because there were just so many problems with that proposal, and it didn't look good. It didn't reflect well on that particular university, perhaps that one has been pushed up to KPT level, right? So the quality control is very important too. So when we talk about application, if you have been successful in the previous cycle, then 75% completion is warranted before you can apply again for this current cycle. And because our FRGS reports are usually submitted in February and August, please ensure that it is submitted in time so that it can be endorsed by the RMC, yeah, of the university. If it's not endorsed, then we can't take it that it is truly 75%. Okay? And I'm going to go into the various sections now with regards to the application, right? So let's go on to the title first of all, right? Now the title has to highlight the scope of the research. When you read it, then you know already what the research is all about, right? Sometimes I find that I have to read it many times before I can decipher what it's all about, right? So in actual fact, the title should also be intelligible to non-specialists, right? I mean, there are of course certain technical words that may need to be part of the title, but try and avoid overly bombastic titles, right? It still has to be intelligible to non-specialists, right? If it's absolutely relevant, then so be it. But try and make it as concise as possible and not lengthy. Yeah. Long titles doesn't necessarily mean it's better, right? A short title which yields key information, short and sweet, right? That is already good enough, right? Now, whether it's catchy or not, probably for FRGS, I find that it is less important. But I do know that if you are applying for TRGS and LRGS, right, because you're applying for, you have a program and you have several projects, then it probably is a bit more, it's nice if it was a catchy title. But I would have thought for FRGS is being direct to the point, okay? So some of the things that have been used, for example, are elucidating correlation, looking into the mechanisms, okay, right? So and so on and so forth, okay? This is a title from my FRGS application in 2014, which was alhamdulillah successful, right? And as you can see, it is pretty short, okay? And we just talked about, I talked about genetic modifiers of hemoglobin F and phenotypic severity in Malaysian beta thalassemia patients. So I was actually performing genotype-phenotype correlation here, okay? So this was the title of my 2-year FRGS project, yeah? And alhamdulillah, it was a first submission. So I was fortunate that it was a first submission, and this was a 2 years project, okay? Now going back to the application process. Now, they will ask you for details of the project leader. Now, this is open to anybody, a young researcher, right, who has confirmed come back from your PhD, okay, to a professor, right? Now, if you have done prior research, you need to upload and show that you have a good track record, right? So I believe every single RMC of the various universities always remind, towards the end of the year, memang akan remind every single researcher, right, to update their profile. Yeah? Ini termasuk H index, yeah, and your past research, yeah, please update it. I have seen where there's sometimes no information at all, and then we, it doesn't show that because when we want to invest money on a researcher, it doesn't show whether you're a serious researcher. Sometimes you probably are, you have lots of research being done, but you still have to update it, okay? So it is a plus point if your past research has got connections with the current research that you are submitting. And all of this is important because it shows that you're an expert and shows that you have personal growth, okay? And your publications, like the past research, really must be updated, right? Again, if you have relevant topics, then we know that you are an expert in that area, okay? And that certainly, again, is a plus point. So, those profiles doesn't only stand for the PIs. It also must be completed by the co-researchers, yeah? The publications, the H index, the research, okay, all must be updated. I certainly will click every single co-researcher. At KPT level, I will click and see whether they are relevant to the team, whether they will play a significant role. And because now in the migrant system, you are asked to put in the roles that each of your co-researcher play. So please do fill that up, including the next PI, right? So you need to show that your team is relevant, has strength, and it is well balanced, okay? Sometimes we also notice that, we don't want anybody to piggyback, okay, onto the project, especially if they're not relevant, right? And because I have also given feedback that, I don't understand why this co-researcher is there, then we can even suggest that this person needs to be removed. Or even if there is somebody that should be there, it's not there, then we will ask for somebody to be added. Okay, but that's all because we want to ensure that the project will run well. Okay, so apart from the details about the researchers, additional information is also required with regards to domain, okay, and we know that there's 7 domains, right? So we're talking about SKK here. When we talk about clusters, there are 8, so you're going to have to choose one of 8, and here is what's relevant. If you are in the SKK, it will be health. MICE-T has to be completed, KEGA, and the SDGs, right? So if you're in the SKK, then like your SDG 3 would probably be the most relevant, right? I mean, it can also map to other SDGs, right? If it has more than one, then you can put more than one. But you have to show that it is indeed related and not just click because you know it is or add because you want to show that more is better. Okay, there has to be relevance there. So this is one of the most important thing that we look at KPT level is the executive summary, because that tells there's an opening to your research proposal, and the executive summary must contain all of these 5 areas, right? When I was reviewing the proposals at my faculty, I realized that some of our perhaps younger researchers, dia tak perasan pun sebab actually ada 5 ni kena ada dalam executive summary but how much you elaborate it depends. Okay, now the problem statement must be there. Objectives, research methodology, well, it has to be simplified. Maybe if you're going to say it's a qualitative approach, you're using, what kind of research instrument, or if it's a laboratory technique, you can just summarize that what you'll be using, looking into gene expression, you're doing a quantitative PCR or immunohistochemistry. You're the expert. You will know what to pluck from your methodology itself and put it into the executive summary, right? And don't forget the expected output in outcomes and implication, right? The significance of the research must also be added. Okay, so NFRGS, unlike a PRGS, generally has no direct or immediate commercial benefits. So be careful. I noticed 2 things when I usually review. Some researchers, maybe the young ones perhaps, they put a lot about introduction, but they don't identify the problem or the research gap analysis. So it becomes like an introduction to a proposal. No, we don't want that. So because the executive summary is only 300 words. So you have to really use those words well. And the other thing is I noticed the significance, right? Sometimes you over extrapolate. Like for the clinical sciences, you're probably going to come up with a particular diagnostic approach or something, improvement of a technique, right? And then, some people will actually say, oh, this will improve, will be put into the garis panduan policy. I don't think you should stretch it so far out lah. I think keep it within reasons, right? So, but please remember that all 5 of these areas must be in the executive summary, and it is limited by 300 words. Okay, so executive summary ni kadang-kadang memang kena tulis banyak kali lah, because you want to make sure the core information are all there. It is written in a single paragraph, although there are 5 different sections. I've noticed some people will put in 5 little paragraphs. No, it is a single paragraph and no references are required here. Okay, so you don't have to cite Zarina at all or something. No, because you only have 300 words. Okay, so you want to use it wisely. So the problem statement must be concise, clear, cohesive. And once you have identified and showed what is the problem that you are trying to address, you're going to show how this study will address it, right? And if you have done prior work related to this particular topic, you can add in, okay, a line, okay? If you think that you want to add in a lot more, then you can elaborate later in the research background. But if you want to, I have seen some proposals which they also mention it because it shows that you are an expert in it and you are wanting to do additional work about it, okay? So your objectives, usually we limit it to just the general objectives here, right? Unless you can summarize part of your specific objectives, but you don't have to list down all of it. So just the salient points. Because again, we are limited by the 300 word. Okay. Now, methodology, I'm still talking about executive summary. Don't be vague, okay? Don't just say, qualitative and you don't even talk about who you're going to sample, where you're going to sample. There must be some details there, all right? Because then, we have no idea what you're trying to do here, okay? And it doesn't sit so well that then we have to start plowing through your methodology section pula, yeah? So you have to try your best to simplify and put in the key details, okay? And I've already mentioned this about overgeneralization, right? Jangan extrapolate too much lah, yeah, and see that it's going to be impactful and you already some people will probably say some commercial value, but it wouldn't be so immediate, right? So keep it within reasons, okay? So again, ensure all the 5 components are included in the executive summary, okay? And because the executive summary is the first thing that we open and read, it is really a first impression, okay? So do invest time in writing it and write it well, because it's the quality that counts and it's the overall quality that matters, okay? So now I'm going to into the next section where we talk about the research background. So here the weightage is quite a lot, it's 15%. And here you are asked to deliberate further about the problem statement, right? So what is the knowledge gap here, right? Is there that a particular disease, this is the pathway that is involved, but you want to fine tune further which processes in that particular pathway are really involved. So you have to talk about that. Maybe that's the gap that is not yet known, right? So what is the problem to be solved, right? And the problem should be significant, right? It should be something that is specific. It shouldn't be seen that you don't really know what you're talking about and your research is looking like it is a fishing expedition, right? We don't want that. We want to know that you are focused in what you are trying to address, okay? And the problem statement should, later that is evident in the methodology, you're going to have to highlight lah nanti, how your methods is going to solve these problems, okay? And again, I've mentioned, if you did not put it in the executive summary, you can elaborate further here, okay? About the preliminary data that you have done. If you do have it, it is a bonus point, okay? Now moving on to these 2 sections which are interrelated, which is the hypothesis and the research questions. Now the hypothesis is usually in the form of statements, okay? It is not questions, right? That it will be derived into research question, right? They complement each other and they are both related to your research objectives, okay? So again, it should be specific, right? And it is best if you can word it in the whys and the hows, okay? And try not to have too many research questions, okay? I mean, it has to be precise and it has to complement your objectives, okay? So then moving on to your literature review, right? This literature review must be able to show that you have the ability to critically evaluate, integrate and synthesize all the relevant and the most current literature, okay? So I've put down here, do not cut and paste. I have actually seen this, okay, because when you actually cite a particular paper, some of us will actually go to that paper and look a little bit about it because we want some clarifications too, or we do our own search on the side, okay? So you're going to need to digest it, right? So as far as concerned, right, you have to put it in your own words and you have to show that you have extracted the information and you have synthesized it or digested it, okay? So and how you do this has to show that, well, the prior research has shown that only point A to point B is sorted in that particular problem. But from point B to C, we still don't know what's happening. Okay, so you have to show that your literature review supports the problem. And how you organize it is very important, right? You have to build up your case, okay? And please make sure that you cite current research, because sometimes I have even caught those who have submit, they don't even cite the current one. Maybe some of them feel if I cite this current one, then they're going to know that oh benda ni dah buat sebenarnya ya, tapi bila kita tengok, then we find that why you didn't cite the most current work, and then if we look at the paper that's not been cited and we find that there is something relevant there, then it doesn't look so good lah on the person who is submitting it, because you have not been thorough in your literature review. Okay, so make sure that you show how your research will fill the gap, and again, do not cut and paste. Okay, now the relevance to government policy, if there are any, please include it. Okay, and again, but don't over exaggerate. You have to show that it is truly relevant. Okay, and when it comes to references, it must be up to date, right? Certainly, we would want to see that you have included references within the last 5 years, okay? So, and of course, you can have, say like you are trying to make reference to a particular technology or something that was done, right? For a certain test, that is a core reference paper. Yeah, you can if it was a paper that was published 10 years ago, but it's absolutely important because it is a core reference paper in which that technique was first built upon, then you can include it, right? But otherwise, you're going to have to include those that are within the 5 years. So I generally say 15 to 20, right? That's a modest number, right? Please, I have seen those who put less than 10, and that's not adequate. But you don't have to put 40, 50, not necessarily. More doesn't necessarily mean better, because sometimes we will still see the papers that you quote and see whether it is relevant or not. Okay, so for the papers that you are picking up the references, it is preferable that you actually use those that are from high impact journals, preferably from Q1 and Q2 if possible, and try not to use published proceedings, okay? Because this is trying to show that the work that you have is of significance and it is potentially impactful, okay? Now, what else about the proposal? Now we go on to the objective. So the research background just now was 15%. So can you see the objectives? 12%. So that's quite tremendous, right? So we have a general objective, right? A single statement, which basically is a summary of your specific objectives, right? So depending on whether your project is a 2 years or a 3 years project, generally about 3 to 5 specific objectives will be enough. Try not to have 6, 7, 8, then we start worrying whether, it could be seen as being ambitious and not focused, right? So please avoid words like to explore or to develop, when you phrase your objectives, right? I think we're talking about to determine, for example, right? So be very precise, or in other words, be smart about your objectives, okay? So it has to be specific, right? Meaning focused. It has to be measurable, right? You can measure. There are variables to measure. It is achievable and realistic, and you can achieve it within the timeline of your proposed project, be it 2 years or whether it is 3 years. Now, I'm just sharing. Sorry, there's a typo here, I realize, okay? This was my FRGS project in 2014, yeah? So I had this to evaluate, the effect of polymorphisms involving this particular gene clusters, okay? In relation to the clinical phenotype of beta thalassemia patients. Okay, so that was my general and my specific, right? So I broke this down further. Okay, so I talked about to determine the types and frequencies of those polymorphisms, right, amongst beta thalassemia patients, right? So it was a complete sentence that I wrote, okay? And my second specific objective was to evaluate the association of those polymorphisms, right, with hemoglobin F level amongst beta thalassemia patients, right? And the third one is to evaluate the association between those polymorphisms with a validated thalassemia clinical severity scoring system. So I believe this is very specific, it's measurable, and this was my FRGS for 2 years, hence there were only 3 specific objectives. So if you're talking about an FRGS that comes up to about 5 years, then you're probably going to need to expand to about FRGS for 3 years, then you're going to have to expand 5 objectives lah specific because nanti terlalu sikit pula kan alright. So this is just an example. Okay. So when it comes to methodology, so just now was 15%, then 12%. So now it comes to 25%. So be mindful where the pemberat is lah So because it's 25%, there must be detailed description of the methods that are used. Okay, I have seen that sometimes some researchers talking about a particular technique where they are going to talk about maybe use of some radiation, but there is no mention about how they are going to adjust the dose of the radiation, for example, or how they are going to plan the angle of the radiation, for example, or how they're going to titrate, right? So the details must be there because essentially when we look at it, we know that this is already good to go. Right, that there mustn't be gaps in your methodology, right? And it will be good if you can show some of the researchers that I have seen, they really write it very nicely that this particular methodology will address objective number 1. Right, so some don't map it like that, some don't write it like that. But if you want to, that it'll be very nice because otherwise, memang the panelists will have to search lah. This one will cover this one, but the panelists are already selected accordingly based on their expertise, right? So if you can do that, then that sits well and it shows that you have invested a lot of time in writing your methodology. Now, if there are any ethical issues, please address them, especially if you're talking about those involving, you're doing animal studies or human sampling, okay? So I have seen research proposals that already have ethics submission. If you do, that's well and good. But if you haven't, that's okay, but you're going to have to address it. You're going to see that you're going to submit because of these concerns and all that. Some even already put in their information sheet and all that. Well, it depends on you, what you want to put. But you have to acknowledge that if there are ethical issues, then you must say that. Because usually by the time, kata insyaAllah, you get the proposal approved, we expect you to put that in already in your laporan, that you have already gotten your ethics approval. Okay. So flowchart is the next section. Make sure it has sufficient details, right? You should include the main activities, right? And I have seen some very nice flowcharts again, which shows the main activities, which then they show that it is vertical and horizontal, where it shows this particular activity addresses this particular research question or objectives. So it's very nicely plotted. Okay, and it shows, that it is well constructed. So, nonetheless, I don't believe in an overly busy flowchart either lah, sebab ini bukan macam TRGS, LRGS, and you have to show that conceptual framework, you do the connectivity, right? That can be quite complex, right? A flowchart, we have sufficient key details is already good enough. Okay, and then when we talk about research activities and milestones, especially when we talk about milestones, please remember it should relate to the timelines of when you need to submit your FRGS reports should you be successful, right? So I've mentioned the reports are every 6 monthly in February and August. So usually you have to seal the timeline by December and June, right? So you have to map it out accordingly, right? So I have seen research activities and milestones yang 1 bulan, right? I think you're going to need to avoid doing that. Anything between like 3 months, that's okay. And when you do the milestones, like say if you have like sampling. So your first milestone, you're probably going to say, well, okay, sampling, 25% completion. So that's what a milestone is, how it's written. Completion of 25% of your samples, right? And at the end of it, completion of project and the manuscript. So you have to know how to write, right? Doesn't mean that every single research activity automatically absorb everything. Itu is seen in your Gantt chart. So the milestones just show how much you want to achieve by a certain timeline. And it's good to try and put it in line with how you need to prepare your report. Then your report writing becomes much easier lah, yeah, okay, more organized, okay. So when it comes to the expected results and benefits, we talked about novel, okay, new findings, right? So it has to show that it is something innovative. I've already mentioned about the quintuple impact, and the rest of this macam publications, right? It is in the garis panduan, okay? So you need 2 publications, right? And one of it is in WAS. So please do put in the name of the journal that you wish to submit to, because it shows that you are serious about the matter, and you have already decided. I mean, sometimes you change later if you're awarded, but that's okay. Sometimes you can't, or maybe you're not successful in that journal, right? Because at the end of the day, the publication is where matters, right? Okay. So and then of course the potential application, please don't extrapolate, over extrapolate lah, yeah, okay. So keep it within reasons, and the GRAs, this is all in the garis panduan. If it's 3 years, it's 1 PhD or 2 MSc or a combination. Or if it's a 2 years FRGS, then it's a full-time research mode, yeah. Okay, these are full-time mode penyelidikan lah, yeah. Okay, now NIP. Now I've seen my colleagues in Fakulti Perubatan that actually memang promise to produce an IP. If you're really truly confident about doing that, that's well and good. But this is not a PRGS, right? PRGS memang kena, yeah. But if you can, by all means, go ahead. If you're confident that you can. But if you're not so sure and you doubtful, then don't. Because at the end of the day, when we look at your submission of final report, and if you have not fulfilled that, then that doesn't look so good in your subsequent application, because you have not fulfilled your promises lah, yeah. Okay. Now, the part where we ask you to fill up the equipments, please do fill it up. Yeah. If maybe you have some that are used in your faculty, some that are used in another department, please do complete it. Right? Don't leave it blank, because it shows that you're an expert, you have the expertise, and it shows that you can sustain your research and that you are good to go. Right? Because the FRGS shouldn't be seen as an opportunity to buy multiple equipments, right? I mean, sometimes you do have to buy a certain equipment, yes. If you justify and put the quotation, yes, you can. But it shouldn't be an exercise where you go buying equipments. So you got to show that you can sustain your research by showing that you do have the core equipments already. Okay. Now, when it comes to patent search, again, this is only encouraged for FRGS, right? And this is to create awareness. So there are specific borang carian patent. Yeah, please complete it. If you complete it properly, then we can give you marks for it. If you don't, then we can't give you marks. Okay, so there's additional marks there. Okay. And research collaborator, again, this is encouraged for FRGS. Make sure that you have a letter of intent. It cannot be a simple email. It has to be a letter of intent. I have seen those yang submit on a blank A4, no letterhead. I won't give any marks there, okay? And please ask your collaborator apa role dia. Katalah it's somebody from the industry talking about a loan of equipment or technical expertise. It has to be written out there, okay? So it is not just a mere email. Risk assessment, well, this is compulsory. Okay, and the risk assessment is from the aspects of technical, timing, and budget, right? So it shows us that you as a researcher, you are aware about risk assessment and risk management. Because you probably think that if you put low for all this, then the evaluator might probably say that, oh, this is a low risk, we can give money. But sometimes when we look at it, we find that I don't think this is low. There's medium to high risk, right? You have to be honest about it, okay? If you think there is medium to high risk, well, then you have to take it. Hopefully tak adalah high risk, okay? But if it's medium risk, then take it as such. And we know that you know that there could be issues, and then you could probably highlight that, especially masa pandemic yang baru ni, lots of issues, right? So how do you mitigate this? Okay. Now the appendices, right? You can submit your letter of intent, or if you had prior publications, right, about the work that is related to your current submission, you can also put that in. This is where you put in your quotations, right? What you think adds strength to your submission, you can put it under your appendices, okay? Now this is the borang carian patent. Now this is the compulsory section. I'm not going to go into detail about this. I'm thinking maybe your RMC has done this anyway with you, but you should attempt to do this. Then only we can give marks. Okay, so it's basically creating awareness to see whether you know that there are patents that have been applied. Okay, and for those who are involved in SKK and so on, right, engineering. This is the other section that you need to complete, okay? Right, so now about the budget. This is important, right? And I'm not going to go into detail about the different budgets because sebab ini semua ada dalam garis panduan. Jadi make sure you know, for example, I think over the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, PhD ni dah naik daripada 2003 ke 2005. Dan sarjana daripada 1008 to 2000. Okay, so make sure that you put in your amount or the budget correct. Okay, and there are certain budget votes that have cap. Katalah yang macam ni perjalanan, right? It shouldn't be more than 40%, and similarly for your accessories here, because like I said, we don't want it to be seen that it's like, you're an expedition to accumulate peralatan lah, okay. But if you justify, well, okay, that's alright, okay. And the details about this, I won't touch upon it, okay, but you can look into the garis panduan, a lot of details there, okay. So maximum ceiling is 250,000. You actually don't have to ask for the maximum, Ada some of us, even myself, when I was younger, we should ask lah 250 because they're going to slash it anyway. Okay. In actual fact, no, right? Of course, money is always the issue, right? But I have seen some of my colleagues in FPER, they got almost that, they asked for 248 or something. So that was a amount. So have an honest account of how much you actually really want. Okay, so when you put your bahan penyelidikan, make sure that details are given, right? And there are quotations too, okay? Because if you just say microbiological study and then you don't even say what you're going to purchase, right? That really doesn't sit well, okay? So give an honest account, but a realistic account. Jangan under budget juga, okay? Because I have colleagues who applied for molecular work, right? And then I think it was only about 120,000, but when we looked at the methods that was used, it was a lot more, right? So we don't want you to be trapped either that you under budget, okay? So at the end, it's an honest account of how much you truly need, okay? And put in the quotations and justifications accordingly. In the assessment form, there is a criteria checklist, and I've already mentioned to you where the absolute percentage yang tinggi-tinggi to where it comes from, right? So it's research background and methodology. So this alone is 40%, yeah. Yang lain tu title 5%, the track record semua. Those are, the quality is 10%. So a little bit here and there does carry weightage, okay? So but certainly the area that carries the most weightage is where you want to really spend more time in writing it well. So some of the comments, okay, later I'll be sharing some of the proposals that I read and the comments that I have given, samples, okay, but not full proposals, okay. So some of the things are like poor deliberation, the ones that I feel that I have read. I don't even know what they're trying to address here. okay? Or maybe the scope of the research was just too wide. They were trying to address so many things, right? It could be a particular illness, for example, a particular disease, but they were addressing aspect A, B, C. No, I think you just have to be very specific, okay? And of course, when it's poorly written, yeah, if there is very, very strong scientific merit and adalah a little bit of errors here and there, that's fine. We will still push it through, right? We're not cruel in that sense, lah, right? Because it's the scientific merit that matters, right? But if it's poorly written, it's not meticulous, there's no details in the methodology, well, then we're not going to approve lah, yeah, of that project, right? And we notice that the methodology does not address the objectives that you want, that you have put forth, okay? Then that also is a problem, right? And sometimes these are like technical knockouts lah, yeah, PI related problems, right? You are not the expert, right? We will look at your profile. We will definitely scrutinize the PI punya profile dulu and to see whether you can carry out this project. Okay, so if you're not from that expertise, then we're not going to invest lah, that amount of money in that particular research. Okay, and we also look at the other researchers lah. Okay. Now, this is the form that I've mentioned, the 10 checklists, the 10 aspects in the checklist. So these are the weightage. I'm pretty sure that you have already seen this, okay? In faculty perubatan, where we had about 3 bengkel permunian, yeah, or 3 or 4, right? We mark this as it is and we return it back to the person, the researcher, so that they will know their marks. It is open. Dia nampak markah dia dekat mana and we give comments. So where the comments are made, that's where they're going to need to improve it further lah, yeah. So okay. So at KPT level, right? So you can already see, if you get those forms from your internal level, you can see where your marks are, right? So we want to strive towards 85 and above lah, yeah. 80, 84 ni, yeah, it's recommended, but it's sometimes you have a lot of much better projects, right? So we're probably going to fund those who are in the highly recommended. So the minute one of those 10 criteria doesn't reach 5, katalah 4, then automatically that particular project is already not funded. I'm just sharing this lah, yeah. Okay. So if your internal evaluators have already done that, then discuss with them how you can improve it further, because you still have the opportunity to keep on improving. I have seen, well, sometimes yang 4-5 submissions yang banyak versions tu, yeah, I do click and see their submission at university level. Some of them have really improved by leaps and bounds, okay? So keep on asking how you can improve your submission, okay? So now I'm going to go to about maybe 6-7 slides about some of the proposals that I have actually reviewed. Yeah? As you can see, these are very truncated, right? Because I am not at liberty or allowed to give the full proposal, right? Okay, but I just want to share examples of what was highly recommended to what was not recommended. Okay. So this particular research talked about immunoglobulin G subclasses and memory B cells. This was the title, and it looked about antibody responses to vaccine. So this was part of the title, okay? And when I read the title, right, although when you read this, it's already truncated, yeah, I could immediately tell what was the scope of the research. Okay, it was very clear. Okay, I asked to add that it is in children, okay, because as this one is vaccine related, because in children they have a series of vaccination, right, especially between the age of in the first 2 years of life, right? So they were focusing on that. So I just made some comments to be a little bit more precise, the executive summary. So you can see this is a highly recommended, and I do believe this was the comments that I have, all of it. So you can see tak banyak comment because it was quite nicely written, right? So they elaborated about the problem of primary immunodeficiency, right? And how it can go undiagnosed in clinical practice is very well explained. They put in both null and alternative, but you don't have to do that, okay? You don't have to put both, only one is required. And they clearly highlighted why you need to do the subclass deficiencies, okay? The why, okay, and the impact. And methodology, there was hardly much that I need to correct. It was just about the inclusion exclusion criteria. They didn't put a full list of where it's going to be performed, okay, but the PI has had a past FRGS, okay, so that sits well, and the is an expert. The PI is an expert in that particular area, okay. So this was a highly recommended proposal, okay, and I believe dia memang dapat pun ya dia punya FRGS, okay. So that's an example, nothing much basically, okay, and it shows the fundamental aspects here. So that shows that a clinical problem in which you look at the fundamental aspects. So this is another one which was recommended. Here it talked about genomic and metabolomics of a condition called craniosynostosis, right? Now, I suggested to tweak the title a bit because this is basically a little bit about genotype, phenotype in some sense, okay? There was some, when they did the executive summary, they only elaborated about FGFR2. So something that is already well known and established, you can mention it, but don't deliberate on it too much, okay? And they didn't mention about the other genes, okay? So this is an area of my expertise, genetics, right? So we can easily pick it up if you have not been, you did not encompass all the other aspects, okay? So, it also talked about how metabolomics will prevent the disease. It said by doing this, then you can halter, okay? But I don't think this is over extrapolating it, because I think here, the best you can actually do a phenotype correlation, but how you are going to prevent progression, that was not evident. So what is not evident and cannot be delivered directly from your research shouldn't be put in there, okay? So I've asked to rephrase some of the objectives, okay, because the objectives look like it was a description of a method that was being used rather than the objective of the research, right? So be careful, right? So I said to identify the spectrum of genetic mutations or profile, right? Because I think they were describing. So there was scientific merit to this particular study. So as you can see, we do scrutinize it carefully, okay? And if there is scientific merit, then we will support it, okay? So the lab methods which was deliberated in the objectives, well, that should be in the methodology. Okay, and again, you have to phrase it correctly because the third one was about genotype, phenotype. So the rest of it, the laboratory details was good. The new theory here to me was the metabolomics rather than the genomics, because remember I mentioned that some of these genes are already well studied, okay? And they promise a predictive phenotyping formula as an IP, okay? Because they have other potential applications, that was accepted. But the minute you want to over extrapolate phenotype, that sounded really unclear and ambitious, okay? So that becomes a bit more applied, and it wasn't even evident in the methodology. So don't over promise, over extrapolate, terlalu jauh ke hadapan. So be realistic in what you can deliver, okay? And this was some of the other concerns. They had a good track record, and this was a recommended proposal. And this was a highly recommended. Very briefly, this was it. This was just the comments that I had. So as you can see, very somebody's mic is on. There's a bit of echo.
Yeah, I think Dr. Norazliani, please mute your mic, please.
Thank you. So this is the comments that was taken from a highly recommended, right? So you will see nanti later my comments for a non-recommended, okay? So tak banyak. because you know it's well written. So you can see the scope was, the title was good, executive summary, all the salient points, and this particular researcher had done good prior work, and it shows continuity of the research, and it shows that that person is an expert. Okay, and that person, I remember, memang ada published work on it already. Very detailed elaboration. That means it shows that the proposal is good to go. Okay, and maybe a little bit some about the written as per objectives. Okay, so some of the research activities was, you know, tu I kata tak nak terlalu satu bulan, you know, there's too many things, right? I think it become really complicated, and then when you want to extrapolate it into milestones, then it becomes even more tricky. Yeah? So but otherwise I thought it was a very detailed and a very well written and organized a proposal, so that was highly recommended. Now, going on to those, I think I have maybe 3 that are non-recommended here. So, actually ada banyak lagi ya, the comments ya. Tapi ini yang saya ambil lah ya daripada I cut it. Because I have been on both sides ya, on somebody who have received a grant, somebody who have applied for a grant, not successful. So kalau you are not successful, it is very disheartening, right? When you tengok a reviewer doesn't give you comment, not fundamental. I think we at KPT are already reminded, please don't put things like that. Please give a good comment, because we actually want to help our co-researchers subsequently submit a good proposal later. So this was a proposal. As you can see, this was the title. Deciphering population genetics, molecular mechanism, iron metabolism, globin genes. So easily I can already pick up, I can already easily pick up 4 big areas here, yeah. Population genetics. I don't even know what do they mean by population genetics here. It wasn't defined. And then they're talking about molecular mechanism, then iron metabolism, globin genes. So there's so many things to look at. And I do not know, in the executive summary, that's when they talked about the methodology. They talked about molecular mechanism study. You can't do that. You have to tell me what are you actually doing. What tests are you doing? What is the method that is being used, right? Not clear. Is that genotype, phenotype? I am also not clear. Okay. Now, they said the output, they're going to create a model, but I don't even know what is the model all about. Okay. What is included in the model? And then the research background, you can see that the title is so broad. Of course, the research background, there were just too many aspects, right? It was not focused. And the problem statement, I didn't know actually what was the problem that they want to address. Was it, was it a polymorphism in iron metabolism? Like, I manage children with thalassemia, right? So I was thinking, iron metabolism, is it something to do with the polymorphisms? Why maybe some of them continue to have high serum ferritin? I don't know. Okay, so everything was very, very broad. Okay, so the iron metabolism data was not well explained, and in the reference, they cited a lot of overseas publications, right? We have a lot of publications from our Malaysian researchers. So sadly, it was not included because this happened to be my pet topic. So I will know that there are areas that are not cited, okay? So if you're talking about globin genes and molecular mechanism, you must cite what is already available here and done, because remember FRGS ni juga acuan Malaysia, right? So you have to know what is relevant and already being done in the country, okay? So again, this was basically, if you want to ask me, everything about this research was very broad and too many specific objectives. Remember I mentioned 3 to 5, but I think they really had a lot more. And some details were given, but very a lot of it was very sparse lah, yeah. And basically the whole quality, essentially, and majority of the researchers' profile were not updated. So I do click every single researcher's profile, right? It is it shows how much you take this seriously if you don't update your profile, okay? And budget for something that is already very basic, right? You don't already vote 11,000 if you don't pay attention to it, which is not difficult to calculate, right? It's either 2,000 or 2,500. It shows that, unfortunately, if young basic things you have not looked into it, then what more of the more complicated things? So I do spend time reviewing, right? I know some people may think that some reviewers only look at executive summary. I certainly do not. Okay, I review everything from the title, right, until habis, right? Okay, so it does take a lot of time, especially. So unfortunately, sometimes these are the type of things that perhaps it could have been better vetted at the university level, yeah, before it goes up higher. This is another one where we talk about development of autism spectrum, yeah. ASD ni autism spectrum disorder. So there's the word development there already in the title, right? We don't want to do that. And then application, development, monitoring, application. These are not keywords that you have in a fundamental grant, okay? So, and then they talked about using a non-digital tool. And here it talks about diagnostics, okay, of autism spectrum disorder. But they didn't even mention what was the gold standard. So remember, you have to know what is it actually being done now. Are there problems with the current tool? And then that's where you bridge the gap. But that wasn't stated. And unfortunately, I thought when I looked again, memang nampak the team wasn't balanced. The research questions were broad, objective, right? I know because even if I'm not an expert, I'm not a developmental pediatrician, I am a pediatrician, I will look back into relevant papers and I will check and see what is being practiced in Malaysia. So we actually use MChat. So it was not even mentioned about MChat. So and then there was issues about methodology, right? Here they talked about main purpose is to detect earlier, but then they want to detect below 6, right? That's not early, right? So you have conflicting statements, okay? And the flow chart, it looks like the researchers proposing a new tool, but the pitfalls of that current gold standard tool is not being addressed, okay? Too many research activities, and then they mentioned about this particular application lah, yeah, that they want to use, but they said multiple users. But they didn't even say who are the users, right? So who's the target, right? So the team wasn't well balanced. I felt that they needed there was no pediatrician, right? And you need a clinical psychologist, right? The project leader has expert in probably doing rehabilitation of children who has ASD, but because this appears to be something that is more of diagnostic, right? So these are the two key people should have been part of the team. Okay, so this was not recommended. So as you can see, actually I had a lot more comments, to be honest, right? But I extracted some of it. So I do look at those that are not recommended because when we return it back, they will want to know, right, why they didn't do well and was rejected. So at KPT we now strive to give good feedback. Okay. And I think this is my last one. This is talking about relationship. This is adverse event following immunization and vaccination record. So don't use again lah. There was all this very generic word, insight, residing, yeah. A lot of typos. I didn't know what they were trying to address here. The problem wasn't clear. Are they trying to address underreporting of the adverse events, or are they addressing the anti-vaxxers? Because here they talked about two different things, and then their study pula. Sekejap ada dua phase, sekejap ada. So it's about being meticulous, right? So very generic. Hypothesis was broad. Literature review was superficial, right? I have seen submissions at our faculty level where it is only like one paragraph or two short paragraphs. So it's got to be a bit more than that lah, yeah. So and sometimes the first paragraph, don't cut and paste lah. Sometimes you just put in, then we do read it, and it's not synthesized. Okay, so it doesn't flow well. Statistics, vaguely written, objective. So it looked to me like it was a fishing exercise. Okay, and they wanted a new framework of reporting. So can you imagine? I'm pretty sure at MOH they have framework, especially now dengan all these COVID vaccines, right? There might still be concerns. Again, of course, nothing is ever perfect in that sense, but they didn't even address that existing framework. Okay, so sama yang macam ASD tu, that bridging the gap, it wasn't clear. Okay, so it was an ambitious project, I felt, and output was a major concern. And they said it was applicable to geriatrics. So track recorded, tak ada. The PI, no prior research. Right, I click, tak ada apa-apa langsung pun, right? I mean, some people might actually start executive summary and that's it. I did read everything, right? Okay, so I try my best when I can, I read everything, okay? And I think because there are not enough experts there, and perhaps he's somebody who is not so well versed yet, and I felt that something like this should not have been pushed up to KPT level. Okay, so this is where quality control at the university level becomes very important. Okay, so that was this is my last slide. So in summary, because we know that the cycles, we know when it's going to come. So always prepare and work on the proposals well in advance, right? Work in a team, all right? Because when you do the research, it's also in a team, right? So your area of expertise must be balanced with the others. Okay, as you can see in the previous other proposals that I shared, some of them didn't have the key people in it, right? So then it becomes lopsided, right? Because we can see where the gaps are in the research itself, okay? Again, time and time again, the problem statement, the research gap analysis is very important. Don't be broad, okay? Be very focused in what you are studying, okay? And your objectives must be specific. Remember, SMART, okay? Pay attention to the methodology because there's a lot of weightage there, and the new concept, ideas, the novelty must be evident there. And again, it always pays to be meticulous when you submit your proposal, right? Sometimes you are the simple typo which occurs repeatedly, right? It doesn't look so good lah. It doesn't sit well. Okay, so research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. So that's all for my talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Zarina, for your very clear and very detailed. I think a very detailed presentation, Prof, because you have a lot of experience in this kind of grants. Okay, now we are moving to the question and answer session. So if especially for the audience, if you have any questions, you may ask directly to us, or just unmute your mic and just ask directly, or you may drop your question in the chat box so I can read your question. Okay, and then for your information, Prof, we also streaming at the YouTube. So ada soalan juga dekat YouTube lah. So maybe nanti I punya partner will copy and paste here. Okay, everyone. So any questions?
If I may,
Yes.
Cik Lokman.
Yeah.
Prof, good morning. I'm Wan Liza. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor to hear from you. It is clear, and I love the sound of your voice, very calm. If I could get to the questions, Prof. You mentioned with regards to the role of the core researcher, and now we have to define if I may, define their functions or their role in the FRGS. Could I invite you to advise us what are the keywords that we should avoid? Because in order to be specific, there are some words that I note that you are a bit, you said to avoid, for example, to develop. So for the core researcher's role, Should it be a direct function or role, or there's certain word that you need to apply to illustrate their role in the FRG grant? Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Wan Liza. So actually when I mentioned the word develop was more pertaining masa the title. Tapi if you are talking about apa tu, maybe you can say that they are an expert in the apa tu gene expression study, for example. Okay, then that's what you need to say lah. I mean, or if you have a apa tu sampling, you might have a clinician who are going to give you sample, right? Janganlah tulis providing sample. It doesn't sound so nice, okay? Maybe provide information on clinical phenotype ke or something like that. It has to, because I tahu sometimes when kita do some research, dia selalu kata clinician tu provide sample je, tak buat benda lain. But probably how you word it, their precise role lah, make it sounds, elevate their role. I don't think there's anything wrong if you say develop in their role, because maybe you're talking about a technique, right? That you, or you want to say they're going to help validate a certain technique, or their expertise in, like I mentioned to you, is the gene expression, right? Or they are in bioinformatics or something. So pick up on their expertise and how they are going to contribute directly to the research. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Prof. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Just one more, Encik Lokman, if I may. Just one more. I noted that I'm not from the medicine faculty. I'm from the social sciences, from law. So I was very happy to see that your title did not have any word with regard, an enhancement or elucidate. You go directly to your research, and I thought that was very, very refreshing. So for fundamental, we actually do not need to highlight the word like enhance, right, Prof? We'll just go straight to the particular research that we want to highlight to the assessor. Am I correct, Prof?
Betul, correct. Cuma saya perasan dia macam ada trending.
Betul. Itu yang saya macam a bit confused. Dia macam trend. I'm sorry, not kelakar, but trend. For example, there's a year where everybody goes with the word normalizing or augmenting, and then ada yang elucidate. So sepanjang tahun tu saya nampak perkataan elucidate tu.
Yeah.
So is it something that you have to follow the trend, or rather you just keep it simple, concise, and specific? Would that be the key?
That's the key. Simple, concise, specific. You nak letak unraveling, deciphering, elucidating, tak apa. Saya nampak di dekat Fakulti Perubatan, last year ada beberapa projek. We had 25, I rasa, approved as per. Interestingly, the trend was elucidating. Tapi diorang dapat lah juga. Tapi maksudnya, kalau you tak guna, maksudnya tak ada maksudnya you takkan dapat. You know what I mean? So if your title is nice, precise, concise, it's already good enough. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cik Lokman.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Waliza. Okay, any other questions?
Yes. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Betul.
I'm Nik Rusmawati from Kelantan. Okay. Thank you, Prof, for nice explanation. I just want to ask about the collaborator. So, if during the methodology, I plan to collect the main bulk of the sample from the university. Two-thirds of the samples are from the university, but because of the university samples is not enough to cover the sample, I will extend the sampling, the source for the sample from the KKM hospital. And yet in the KKM hospital also there is expert in that area. So can I include their experts, not only part of the study, but I claim to be a collaborator?
Yeah, boleh? Sebab I'm being a clinician myself, right? So we should include a co-researcher, right? From the KKM, because you will facilitate your sampling process, right? Number one, walaupun banyak from your center, that will be number one. And then you can put that as a collaborator, tapi kena ada letterhead lah juga. Maksudnya maybe apa tu, they are co-researcher, tapi their primary role would be co-researcher lah, to be honest already, kan? Unless
Yeah,
they are
yeah,
coming from a society ke, for example, or another, you can put, to me it doesn't matter, you can also put them apa tu, maybe it's the hospital ke, for example, and then maybe the PI is your, I mean the co is your the KKM specialist. Maybe somebody yang you collaborate, you can put from the hospital that you're collecting lah, yeah, or a society, you know, the professional society, for example, that would be ni lah. You can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. My problem is how to produce or to get the letter of intent.
Oh, so if you know the center where you are going to collect from, is it one center ke beberapa center?
Only two center. The main bar, as I mentioned, is from the University Hospital.
Yeah.
But just to top up, I have to take from the other KKM hospital. Only one KKM hospital.
Then it should come from the hospital itself then. So your co-researcher is your MOH colleague, and
Yeah.
your usually kan dia orang want to get green light lah. You can ask your colleague yang dekat hospital tu, boleh ke pengarah dia give a green light to say that they are collaborating with you. That could be an example. Yeah.
Okay. One more question about the number of researchers. Yeah. Is it limit up to 6, or if I add extra more than 6, what happen?
Oh, if you add more than 6, right, that's already too much, okay? Because we are going to then scrutinize and ask what is the role. I can't remember, I have to check back dekat the recent, apa tu, I don't think it's spelled out precisely, okay, in the garis panduan. Tetapi, if you can truly justify why you need more than 6, maybe it can be considered. But then we will also question lah, kenapa selalu ramai yang perlu ada kat situ, right? I don't think we will just necessarily kick out. To me, I don't think it's a kick out thing lah, that we simply kick out. I mean, let's say if your proposal has a lot of scientific merit, right? I would think that it's very cruel lah kita just kick out the proposal because you ada 7, 8 kan. You know, at the most we probably say please reduce the number of researchers, right? Okay, because nanti you have somebody yang piggyback. I know this because you know we've all been in the university for so long. We have some those yang membonceng lah ya. So we don't want
Itulah isu bonceng tu, Prof. But it's really important. But when I click the validation part kan, yang kat submission part tu, dia ada yang validation part tu. So when I click there, so dia come out lah dia punya, kita panggil apa, yang something yang out of kita panggil apa, not follow the rules tu. Maknanya bila saya dia tengok, ya the system tengok I put more than 6, so the system recommend to remove one.
If the system already recommends, then you must remove it.
Okay.
Sebab penat-penat you going to do a nice proposal and then alamak ada satu masalah kat situ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Prof.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Maaf, hari ni saya terang sikit sebab saya nampak Prof Zarina bersinar hari ni. Saya Zuhairi daripada Sport Science UiTM Jengka. Okay, saya nak tanya tentang since Prof baru cakap tadi pasal tentang what are the expected outcome, the novelty. So kita jangan go for ambitious sangat, kata untuk masa depan dunia lah apa semua kan. So maybe can you help me in terms of clarifying pasal benda tu? Okay, and then satu lagi dekat potential application, what are the example of the right words that I can use? I would like to do in identifying talents, sport talents dekat orang asli dengan kanak-kanak di rural. So that is my idea for FRGS. So maybe what can I relate on the potential application. So thank you very much, Prof.
Well, then maybe you have to say your potential application is like what you have mentioned lah, right? Because why do you want to identify them actually? Because are you already using this amongst others? Because now you are very specific.
Previously on my PhD study, saya dah buat dekat kanak-kanak rural di bahagian pendalaman Sabah lah. And then to be honest, dia orang punya physical performance much more better than budak-budak di Semenanjung dan budak-budak di urban. And in studies banyak suggest budak-budak urban lagi sihat and lagi physically active. But in terms of my study, I go around Malaysia, I got about 2,000 subjects. So the orang yang lagi superior adalah budak-budak urban, rural di bahagian pendalaman. So I intend untuk include sekali anak orang asli. Sebab dia orang punya life lagi dalam hutan, dia orang tak tidur dengan gadget. So and I would like to be put untuk kata apa kan, untuk buat benda ni sebagai part of the talent identification process. So that is my intention lah.
So I think you already have some keywords there. I think this is all about equal opportunities, right? And talent identification. And then you can actually cite based on your work before this, and then I hope you cite your work yang 2000 tu. And then this is about having macam satu lah, equal opportunities, correct? And a better selection criteria for identifying talent. So it will be something like that. So it's literally saying like what you have said, right? Sometimes kita selalu macam rasa kita kena bombastic, over exaggerate. But in actual fact, Dr. Zul tadi, what you have mentioned is exactly what has to be written inside there. Yeah. Because you want to actually allow others, right? Also to come on board, isn't it?
Yes. Because currently talent ID program banyak buat dekat bandar kan. So dia orang jarang pergi ke rural area.
Yeah. So equal opportunities to everybody, right? And that I think that's a key word there, right? And to identify.
Yang kita jumpa tu.
Oh, okay. Because you want to show kan, diorang ni kadang-kadang sama lah macam when I do my clinics kan, the rural people do not have equitable access. Our word will be equitable access. So this one will be equal opportunities, so that then you will probably say I don't know how you can extrapolate. So when you are giving them opportunities, then that elevates their life and all that, then you tengok macam mana lagi, sometimes you boleh tengok dalam those SDGs, etc. You're talking about some of them may have poverty, so you are elevating their well-being and all that stuff. So, but again, don't overdo it. So something like some of the phrases that I have mentioned just now lah should be okay. Good.
Baru nampak lah tu elevating on every and so on lah. So let's say I based di Jingka. So let's say I prefer to go to the rural areas, especially in Sabah, Sarawak. And akan menjadi isu ke kalau kata dia ni banyak kena buat kerja luar, kena pergi Sabah, Sarawak, masuk pedalaman, tak buat kerja hakiki bersyarah ke apa contoh lah. And then budgeting mungkin banyak dekat nak pergi fly lah, naik boat lah, sewa kereta. Is that going to be issue?
It sounds an issue more towards the university lah, if you're asking me. Because if you need to do that, because you're going to say your sampling cannot be just so focused one ethnic group ke apa ke kan, right? If it's required for you to have better sampling, then that justifies why you need to do. But then then you have to, I think if you get the grant and your university will need to understand lah how best to do that. But if you think that it's going to be a problem traveling and all that, then you probably will need to limit the sites that you collect your samples from. Do you know what I mean? And the timing of your sampling and all that. So maybe if you can show that, and later if you do get your grant, you show to the university, well, I have actually taken these measures, you know, that I need to, but I have cut back on certain things. Because if you justify, you memang perlu kena buat sampling at these various areas, memang perlulah, but the justification and the rationale for that sampling must be clearly explained. Because kita pun akan tanya from the research background kan, where are you, sebab kadang-kadang kan some people say we are going to do macam I mentioned tadi, Malaysian beta thalassemia patients. But if you only sample from one center, then it's not reflective to say it's Malaysian, right? Kan, right? So justification lah, back to justification and rationale. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your kind explanation. Thank you.
Okay, sama-sama.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zul. Prof, Prof Zarina, we have a few questions in the chat box. So I will read it for you. Okay, the first question is, Assalamualaikum, Prof. How is the easiest way for me to understand the meaning of fundamental research? Is there a keyword that can interpret it? Is there a keyword that needs to be in research title so that it looks fundamental? Or so what is your response to that?
Yeah, so kita tak perlulah letak perkataan fundamental dalam title fundamental tu kan, ya. That doesn't mean that I think if you put that, then we probably say ini sorok belakang tabir sikit lah, ya. So you know, like I mentioned, right, from this is from perubatan ke tadi, kau soalan tadi? Fakulti perubatan ke? Tak cakap.
No mention any.
So I'm sorry, probably some of my example memang because I'm from social science, is it? Well, what are the you know, kalau we talk about social science, because I'm not reviewing social science lah, ya, but maybe you can relate it to like mechanisms, right? Maybe there are certain problems in maybe let's say there was like cyberbullying or something. I don't know, I'm just thinking out of tiba-tiba. So you want to know what are the factors, right, that affects maybe, right? Some people want to talk about intervention for cyberbullying and all that. But let's say you are trying to identify what are the factors that will actually affect or put the children more at risk. I'm sure there are a lot of studies that are done. So you're going to bridge the gap and find out apa yang dah buat. So bila nak kata what are the words, kalau yang saya tunjuk tadi tu yang cakap pasal disease process, pathways, mechanism, right? So those are some of the words that I would think in medical lah, ya. But for social science, I'm afraid I was just citing that problem lah. That means, you know, identifying I don't know, risk factors or something that and I don't know what the problem that you have. So maybe it could be the risk factors, or maybe do you have a title that you are proposing now? What aspect?
This is from this question from Dr. Lilawati. If you have Dr. Lilawati, if you may, you can you can explain to us.
If you explain, then maybe kita boleh try and see how to phrase it.
Yeah.
Oh, she got problem with her mic.
Okay, it's okay. All right. So, Prof, we have another question from Dr. Iskandar. Okay, could you please explain more on research gap analysis? What the FRGS wants us to write on research gap analysis in the proposal, actually.
Yeah.
Meaning
So, research gap analysis means, katalah you have identified a problem, right? Like for me, I just cite on my topic lah, but I think I can generalize it lah, ya. Like I mentioned about my project yang thalassemia tu, right? Now, maybe many of you will know that thalassemia patients require blood transfusion, right? But not every thalassemia patient require transfusion tiap-tiap bulan. Maybe ada yang require 2 bulan, ada yang require 3 bulan, right? So how do we actually want to fine tune who are the ones who are going to require 2 bulan, 3 bulan, you know what I mean? So that is the problem that we find in clinical practice still to some extent. So when I talk about research gap analysis, then I have to kupas lah that problem. Maksudnya that is the problem. I do not know how to identify accurately who will be transfusion dependent, who will be non-transfusion dependent. So then I have to actually find out at the moment what are the processes that I use, right, to identify yang kena masuk transfusion and how I want to fine tune it further. So for example, katalah yang macam I mentioned, I looked at the gene polymorphisms because that could affect disease severity. So we don't do that diagnosis yet at that level. We only do primary diagnosis. We don't do at a higher level of diagnosis. So because that one is not addressed yet in Malaysia, so that is how I want to there's the gap there lah. Ya, maksudnya you dah identify problem, you tak tahu how to differentiate. Okay, but now you want to gap it. So you then have to find out apa yang buat sekarang dan apa yang you nak buat untuk address that problem. That's what I mean by the research gap analysis lah. Macam tadi juga the vaccination, remember I mentioned to you, or the autism, they want to improve the diagnosis. But yet, dia kata if you diagnose autism late, then your intervention starts late. So you know the child will have more problems if you don't diagnose early. But then what are the problems in diagnosing the child early? And what is being done? So you have to say that, oh, you know, at the moment they diagnosed very late. But you are now going to postulate a tool that diagnose them at maybe 1 year old, for example. So how do you now, because you say the problem is diagnosis is late. So how do you want to bridge that gap? So you have to tell us now apa yang dibuat sekarang dan apa yang you akan buat untuk overcome that problem. So I'm so sorry if I'm using, it's like clinical punya ni lah, but I hope the explanation was a bit more generic lah. Maksudnya in your day to day, your maybe it's a lab technique, right? You find out that apa-apa you buat pun this is going to cause this problem, right? So what is it that you can do to improve that technique that is going to make it better? So you have to address the problem, the old technique, and what your new technique is going to need lah, yeah. The fundamental aspects of it lah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question, Prof. Okay, salam Prof Zarina. Is it possible for senior lecturer dalam kurungan since clinicians do not have PhD for a PhD FRGS project? So this one I'm not sure. Is it clear? I think not clear question. Either you are going to apply for the FRGS or senior lecturer as a PhD, calon PhD for the FRGS. Right.
Yeah, I think I may understand this because
Yeah.
you see, traditionally, if you are wanting to have a PhD student, then you kena ada PhD, right? Saya tak pasti dekat UiTM macam mana, tetapi macam dekat UKM, kita ada clause. If you are a senior clinician, I think up to about 5 years, right? You don't have a PhD, but you are an expert. Maybe, I think our cap in UKM is about 5 years. It is in our peraturan siswaza. So if you are a senior clinician, you would have already have the expert. You are allowed to supervise a PhD student by peraturan your university. So you have to check your university. And provided your department macam kita ada konsolidasi program konsolidasi. So our clinical departments can also take PhD students. Right, so I have clinicians who are psychiatrists who can take PhD students because they are already 5-7 years already, and kita ada that program konsolidasi, right? Maksudnya it's a generic PhD lah. Maksudnya kena check lah the regulations of your university. Yep. Dekat UKM kita boleh buat sekarang. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Okay, next question is, hi Prof. Thanks for this great sharing. It has always been recommended in FRGS talks to use why, how. Okay, for the research questions, sometimes it is quite challenging to formulate our research questions using them. In actual practice or other kinds of research question, for example, to what extent acceptable and have been granted successfully. In actual process are other kinds of research question, for example, to what extent acceptable and have been granted successfully. That's the questions.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. Apa tu, it's not always easy lah to put the why and the how kan. So kalau you ada juga soalan yang you kata what, boleh. Tapi janganlah semua what. You have a few objectives. So some of that is going to be saying how does this affect the maybe the severity of the disease or something kan. How does this polymorphism affect the severity or something. But if you have some hows and you have maybe one what, that's fine. Kita tak adalah nak kick out just because you have ada keluar what juga kat situ, no lah. I think we look at the overall concept, right? Yeah.
Okay, Prof. Okay, Prof. Ada sikit lagi soalan ni. Okay, Assalamualaikum, Prof. Okay, this one is from Dr. Sadia Sultan. Okay. Okay, this is regarding on the PI contribution. If we have 3 objectives and only first objective related to PI and the second and third objective are not related, are related to co-researcher, is it okay?
I that's okay to me lah ya, sebab dia lain sikit macam ni FRGS, right? Kita tak adalah tally sampai macam tu. You know, if we are talking about T dengan L, then we want to see your contribution much further, because for T and L, if you are a program head, you have to lead one of the projects, right? Tapi macam ni kita, when I review that, I tak adalah do mapping to that point lah to see dia ni contribute yang mana, right? I think as long as you contribute, because in the team mesti ada more than 3 kan. So I'm sure you, janganlah kata you only contribute to one objective. You as the PI already contribute towards planning of the entire project, right? And that was already a big contribution, right? So if you are contributing one aspect, maybe bioinformatics somebody else buat, that is fine. But that's why you don't work alone anyway. It's a team. But you have to show that you are contributing. That's the most important thing. If you are not an expert in anything at all, that's where the problem arises. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, next questions comes from Dr. Iksan. Okay, Assalamualaikum, Prof. Zarina. I am from the Faculty of Medicine and we do have full research mode postgraduate students. Okay, clinical master's course is a mixed mode. Can we put a clinical master student, for example, DRPH ni, I'm not sure what stand for. DRPH student as the GRE. Can we put? We don't have full research, yes.
Okay, now dia kalau I was timbalan dekan postgraduate. So kalau it is a mixed mode, right? It's a no, clinical masters, because memang dalam kriteria dia dah sekarang underline lebih bold perasan full time research mode. So clinical masters kita punya MMed tu semua, it is not a research mode. Right, so it's a no. Yes, it's a no can do, because I have had past experience with that. Yeah, okay, dia takkan terima. Dia kata tidak fulfill bakat lah ya. So like for me juga, I had to have one MSc student. Remember, I had my application. My other MMed student did a part of it, but I tak boleh mengaku lah dia as my bakat. Dia FRGS. So memang kena research mode. Yeah, and when you talk about DRPH just now, is your DRPH a PhD level, right? Kerangka 8, betul
It's a Doctor of Public Health, Prof.
Yes, but
yes.
Di kerangka 8 kan, if I'm not mistaken. I think you're going to have to clarify that very carefully, right? If it's a kerangka 8 PhD, probably, but can you please double check on that? because it is like dia lain sikit daripada clinical masters. Dia memang macam clinical masters yang pergi ni kan, tapi dia public health. Saya tahu DRPH kerangka 8 if I'm not mistaken, and it's a PhD mode. Tapi can you clarify that? I probably need you to be very sure. Sebab saya tak nak apa-apa technical yang tercicir lah ya. Clinical masters no.
Okay, that's all. I think the question in the chat box. Okay, for the audience, so my partner already gave you a link for your attendance. So if you please fill in the links for your attendance. Okay, we open it for about 10 minutes and we close it. All right, so any other question? The last question maybe.
Sorry,
Yes.
yeah, saya still interested yang question yang DRPH tadi as apa yang could be claimed as a PhD student. So apa conclusion yang Prof bagi tadi ya?
Can you check with your RMC itself lah ya, sebab I think kalau dia orang tak berapa sure, RMC boleh check dengan the higher up of KPT. Right, because ini you akan cakap, tapi bila you submit tu you can still later pick another student, right? You know what I mean? You just commit first lah and say PhD, right? But you have to ask whether because DRPH is kerangka 8, clinical masters is kerangka 7. So clinical masters is not PhD, it's a mixed mode. Dah lah dia mixed mode, dia kerangka 7. PhD like DRPH is kerangka 8. So logically it should be, but I'm just a bit concerned it may not. So can you ask maybe Dr. Lokman lah ya, can clarify ya, through with the through RMC and ask the higher up lah in KPT. You can clarify that. Sebab dulu at one time people thought clinical masters boleh and we put in, then after that tak boleh. So I don't want it to be trapped like that lah, tu saja.
So if we put PhD but in practical letter, insyaAllah kalau dapat grant tu kita ambil lah DRPH, or better we put directly DRPH?
And for now, I rasa you should put just PhD. Right? Tapi sebab you tengah proses macam ni kan, nanti you boleh betulkan kemudian kan, right? Takut nanti you belum sempat lagi clarify ni, you jangan letak DRPH walaupun is kerangka 8, because you can have kan yang PhD yang buat JKM kan, actual PhD, right? But the clinical related, right? So that will be a safer bet lah if you ask me. Once you clarify that, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Prof Zarina, this is my maybe the last question penutup, soalan penutup. I have one question actually, and I think my friends and my colleagues also has same experience. I applied for FRGS about 3 times already and all got rejected. Mungkin tak ada rezeki lagi ya, Prof. And then belum ada lagi.
Tak ada, belum ada insyaAllah. Yes. Okay.
Okay, so one of the comment, sometimes I got a comment from the examiner. This is university level, which is examiner like this agree with my it's not aligned with my opinion. So how can we respond to that? Is it because sometimes like we publish paper, we reviewer is always right. Sometimes how to respond to that kind of situation?
So kadang-kadang kita pun risau. I want to say sometimes reviewers ni banyak. It's human nature kan, different people, right? So I have seen where one person did not lepas at university level, tapi diminta lagi sekali oleh that person for another review. Right, so maksudnya ada percengkahan between, dia patutnya ada 2 kan, lepas tu tak dapat lagi, third person comes in. So hopefully the third reviewer ni is fair lah in that sense, right? But I just want to share, if there is a basis and it is justified that what your views are correct, right? Then maybe you can ask the RMC to relook again, right? Because I have seen one that was supposedly not pushed at the university level, tetapi bila tengok balik dia kata okay lah kita pushkan juga, and you know that person dapat FRGS.
Oh, I see.
Yes, so you know, of course bila dah naik ke atas dekat KPT tu is harder to challenge lah, tapi bila kita tengah sift through lah kan at the university level, if you don't feel satisfied, then you have to have an open discussion with that person lah. But sometimes what I'm trying to say is tak semestinya orang tu pun selalu betul, ya. Okay, it depends on the context of things, the opinions, right? So maybe kena discuss balik lah dengan RMC and see how, right? See whether with your TD ke, ya, Timbalan Dekan, see how. I'm sure insyaAllah there are ways to overcome that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Zarina. So we are comes to the end of the session actually. There's about 2 hours, 2 hours presentation with session with Prof. Zarina.
My pleasure.
And I believe it was very beneficial and for everybody's and especially for the applicants for this year lah, insyaAllah. So on behalf of the NCPI, I would like to say thank you very much, Prof, for joining us this morning to sharing with us a lot of advice and technical aspects, everything about in terms of your experience. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all the audience also for staying with us for about 2 hours, and I really appreciate that. And inshallah we're going to meet again soon later on. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.
Terima kasih. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thanks, Prof.
You're welcome.
Zarina, sorry. Would you mind to spend 1 minute for my question?